Welcome to Bear Era, folks. We've got a live stream for you today because it is draft season and we know you have questions. Kind of feels like a boiler, all the pressure building up, steam. Everybody's got tips and tricks and insights, rumors, you name it. We're within the 30-day mark, so most of it is smoke, but that's okay. We will help you part the smoke as best we can. Ciaran, how you doing today?
I'm doing very, very well. As you said, these next 3 to 4 weeks is it's carnage the way it comes to the draft because you're going to hear rumors absolutely everywhere. Guys are going to make visits, and then suddenly this guy is definitely getting drafted by this team, even though they had absolutely no interest in drafting said player. We get to hear a little bit from GMs, coaches over the last couple of days, and again, most of what they were saying is probably a little bit of BS, but we'll kind of dig through the weeds of what we heard and kind of what we've been doing the last while or since we have the last live show on, kind of who we've dug into, who we like, and I guess who we think would be, as we're getting closer to the draft, who we really would like the Bears to nab and add to this football team.
That would be awesome. We certainly have a bunch of players that we like, but we want to hear the players that you like too. That's the whole point of having live streams, is the interaction. And the interaction for us has been great. We topped 1,000 subs on YouTube. That is part of this stream, is celebrating that and thanking all of you for the support, not only just recently as we've kicked over that 1,000 sub mark, but through the entire last year. We started about 3 or 4 weeks into last year's season, which was a little bit late, but having everybody hop on board, interact the entire time, share their thoughts, questions is really kind of a cornerstone of what this is all about. So thank all of you. And we are going to do a giveaway tonight because, ta-da, we reached 1,000 subscribers, and Homage, one of our clothing partners, or our only clothing partner, I should say, had this collaboration with New Era Caps. This is an official. I have not worn it, so this is not a game-worn cap, but we are going to be giving that away to one lucky viewer tonight, as a thanks to all of you for the support that you've shown us. Couldn't have done it without you. Didn't really want to do it without all of you. It's really the reason we're here. So with that, we will probably just kick it off because I imagine there are plenty of questions. There seem to be plenty floating around. I don't know, Ciaran, I didn't ask you this before the show, but have you heard that the Bears might be sniffing around trading up?
I have.
Yeah.
I've heard. That's why when I saw a lot of people, I know that Ryan Paul spoke today, and I think it was 2 days ago, and it kind of was insinuating the opposite. But like, all the smoke around the Bears is they're more likely to trade up than trade down. So
yeah,
yeah.
there's definitely some motion there, but again, it is smokescreen season.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what's exactly to be believed, so don't panic if you think that's a terrible idea like I do. Just
Mm-hmm.
know that it's part of the territory. It's due diligence. They are definitely asking teams what it would cost to do that, because this is the time of year you do that. You make sure that, hey, if we were going to move up, if there was a player we wanted there, what would it cost? Especially in this year where there's so many even grades throughout the class, seeing if somebody's going to give you a discount. Not that they should, but they might. They might realize they're in a similar spot. The player they wanted is gone. They can maybe pick up a pick, even if it's not typically the pick they would acquire in such a trade down. They might be willing to take it this year. They might have more
Mm-hmm.
holes than the Bears do. So this is the time to do due diligence. All teams are doing it, whether or not they're publicizing it. The Bears are doing it as well. Whether or not that comes to pass, again, I don't think that's the greatest idea for where this team is and where this draft sits, but it is a possibility and they're exploring it. We'll see. Have definitely heard some things about that in the past few days. So not saying it's going to happen, saying it's part of what all teams do, and definitely hearing about it. It could happen, whether or not we think it's a great idea. But I just wanted to take your temperature on that.
I think the interesting one here is where when you hear from these kind of GM meetings and ownership meetings, when the coach and the GM talk, most of what they say is kind of vanilla and what you expect. But the one thing that I kind of took away from it is it's very clear that they're not very high on the prospects that could be available at 10, because you hear them talk about the top of the draft and mentioning a limited pool of blue players. From most people, once that came out, that was the first thing that I think everybody was trying to see, like, oh, how many do they think there are? Like, who do we think that's going to be included in that? You've been seeing like a lot of the national guys kind of mention. I know from the episode that we just had with Matt Miller and reading some of the stuff he's put out there, then listening to what Daniel Jeremiah has put out yesterday, I think it was. Most of these guys are saying there's like 5 or 6 guys within that group, and talking to people that cover the team, people that were at the owners' meetings, the talk is that there's probably about 4.
Yeah.
And the problem for the Bears is they're at the point of where they need to add top tier talent. And if they're not convinced that it will be there at 10, if the cost, like you said, is not going to be crazy, maybe they see it's kind of the price worth paying if the specific prospect they want gets to the team that's not trying to kind of go crazy with what they're asking for. And I think that's where it is. It'll come down to, if it gets to a point, like let's just say it's with the Raiders, right? Like at 7. Well, like you're going 3 spots up. If they're not asking for crazy amounts, maybe if the player they want hits there, they pull the trade. Versus maybe if they spoke the same to the Jets and the Jets are like, nah, we need a first round pick for you to move up again. They're like, okay, absolutely not. It's an interesting one because I think that was the one thing that you heard both Ben Johnson and Ryan Pauls kind of come out with, that it's a limited group at the top. But the interesting part that Pauls mentioned was when he was trying to make it more of a positive about his second round picks and his third round picks, but he kind of gave away a little bit as well, where he said the group from all the way up to 70 is pretty good and pretty close. But the fact that he mentioned from single digits to that point, and that's where you're like, they don't feel like there's going to be loads of players that's going to be too dissimilar from where they may pick a 10 versus where they may pick a 39. So if they see a difference maker, it's not a surprise some of those rumors have started to kind of come out there, because this is the time of the year that teams do talk. They don't just talk on draft night. They have all these deals kind of put in place way before that. If a specific prospect gets to a certain point, they might be willing to make the move. And we know Ryan Pauls was willing to trade up for Roma Dunze last year, and it was Ian Cunningham that stopped them. So if you think that Ryan Pauls, if he falls in love with someone, won't try and move up this year, you're kidding yourself.
I would agree with that. And I would also say that, again, in a typical year, which this is not, a lot of people are saying this draft is bad. It is not bad, but it is different in the fact that it has very few blue chip players up at the top. Those chip players are not really in the categories where people hold the most value in terms of draft spots. They're not at quarterback. They are not at offensive tackle. They're not even necessarily at wide receiver. So you have a lot of top players who don't play quote unquote top positions, and that makes the value proposition really tough. But the flip side of that coin is it makes going down less expensive, or at least it should. We'll see how teams react to the trade value chart and saying, hey, we'll give you 70 cents on the dollar or 30 cents on the dollar this year, because every player from 15 to 70 or 75, depending on the team and the board, have very similar grades. And again, they're not in those premium positions. So we're not going to give you full boat to move, 3 or 4 spots. And that's where I could see it get interesting. I don't think the Bears are going from 10 to 4. I don't even necessarily think they're going from 10 to 5, but at 6, at 7, if a player they really covet is there, I could see them doing it. I'm not saying they should or that I want them to. I'm saying it could be possible in this year. Whereas in other years, I would be steadfast against it because the cost is going to be absolutely ridiculous. So if a team's willing to give them a discount, not that they should, but if they are, because they read the room and say, hey, I'm not going to be able to get full value out of moving down, and this is better than nothing. And again, if I move back and it's a 3rd round pick, there's a wide number of players that I like with that 3rd round pick that I might be able to get my hands on and fill up the holes of my team. So we'll see how it goes. I hope they don't trade up just from a value standpoint because they're already a pick down next year. It gets hard overall when you look at a 2 or 3 year spread in the draft. If you're continually trading up and getting yourself less swings, it gets very hard to fill your team up because you end up spending a lot of assets that would basically give you cheap labor, and you need cheap labor in the NFL, and the draft is the place to get that. So we will see whether or not the Bears decide that's worth it if a player slides. I also don't know that pinning your hopes on one player, especially in this draft, is particularly worth it, short of maybe one Abdul Carter, but I don't think he's going to get anywhere near where the Bears could go up and get him. So after that, it's very much a fit conversation. Ben said some interesting things about Tyler Warren, which is fascinating. I mean, we knew that Warren was going to be a player that Ben would think is absolute candy. It's going to be hard for him to lay off a guy with that much size and versatility and a different skill set and ability to line up in different spots on the field. So not surprising again that he spoke glowingly about Tyler Warren, but let's dive into some of these questions because I think other folks have other takes on this, and I want to explore.
I will say one thing that I heard this week on Tyler Warren
Yeah.
is that for all the Bears fans that don't want them to take a tight end at 10, I've heard from 3 different people this week that there's a very good chance he's not there.
Yeah.
And as high as 5.
Yeah. Tyler Warren is, in my view, a borderline blue chip prospect, not because I don't think he's the best tight end. I actually do. I like Colson Loveland as well, but I think Tyler Warren is the best tight end in this draft. It's close, but I would pick Warren over Colson Loveland unless I was a very specific team. Loveland is super talented. And look, the Bears might be really high on him as well, but I like Tyler Warren's versatility. I like his size, certainly his physicality in the blocking game. Loveland can block, but it's a different kind of blocking. And I think teams are going to see that. And again, kind of throw the value chart out the window and say, look, I typically up here, I would be picking an edge or an offensive tackle, but the 2 offensive tackles I might've picked are already gone. The one edge I really wanted to pick is gone. After that, it's very possible that Donovan Izraku is the next selected edge in this draft, not because he's the next most talented edge in this draft, but because he's the cleanest edge prospect. And again, not somebody that you would, typically jump at in a typical year in the top 10. So they're going to be looking at players and just go, well, we've got a pick here. We don't really like the trade down options. We're just going to have to take a good player. Tyler Warren is a very clean, very solid, very high floor prospect that you can just sort of pin your hat on and say, hey, we didn't miss in the top 10. All right, moving on. Now we're going to go get that wide middle of the draft with the rest of our picks. So I can see many GMs who are risk averse leaning his way and going, I'm not going to be sad about picking Tyler Warren. Fans might be sad about value just because of the letters in front of his name, but they're not going to be sad when they see him on the field with the football in his hands. So speaking of, did you see breaking news right before we hopped on that Trey McBride is now the highest paid tight end in the league? My former TE1, there's a lot of people that said, that year when I had him TE1. I was like, oh yeah? Okay, cool. All right. You've seen any questions that you really like? I'm going to scan through here and pick some out.
Let's just go from the start, maybe.
Yeah. It says Ashton Genty, no matter what, from Nick Urbaszewski. Nick, no matter what is a little strong for me. If he ends up a Bear, even if they trade up a little bit to get him, trading up a lot to get him, I might draw a line at just from a process standpoint, but from a player standpoint, again, if you're talking about super high floor, great fit for the offense, you're not going to be sad if you pick Ashton Genty as a football player. Like, his contribution to your team is going to be immediate and very good. So I'm with you in a theoretical sense of I love the player. I love the fit. If they say theoretically, we're going to try and get to 4 to get him. I don't love the process. I think it's too much to give up for that player. If he gets to 6 or 7 and somebody's willing to give you a bit of a discount to move up, he is one of the blue chip players in this draft. Make no mistake about that. So I would not be sad about it because of who he is. I get people don't want a running back in the top 10. My question to them is, Okay, then who do you want in this
Mhm.
year's top 10? And don't say a position. Don't say, oh, you have to draft an offensive tackle. Tell me which offensive tackle you really want, because it gets very difficult after pick 4. I've done a bunch of combo mock drafts now. We did one with the NFL Stock Exchange guys over a bootleg. And, after pick 4, like the discussions were all like this. Well, I don't really want to take this guy, but I don't really have another choice in terms of value. So I'm going to pick this guy, and fans are going to scream, and we're going to move on. And all of us just tried to go for the best possible fit with the best possible player. And that's not always the sexiest positional designation. So the Raiders extending Geno Smith. Raiders are a lock for Genty. Well, I don't think they are. I don't think those two things are connected. I'm really happy for Geno. He deserves the money for sure. I think there are multiple ways the Raiders could go that would make a lot of sense. I could also see them picking Genty, absolutely, but lock is too strong for me. I'll just say that. Trash Panda. Hey guys, if we take a left tackle in the draft and they win the spot over Braxton, what trade value do you think Braxton would go for? My answer is 0. You're not trading Braxton Jones no matter who wins it. You need 3 tackles in this league, especially with as long as the season's gotten 17, possibly soon 18 games. A multiple of offensive linemen are going to play. Ben Johnson said it in his podium session at the combine. He said it's not 5 guys that play, it's 8 or 9. So you need your best 6 or 7 assembled at the beginning of the season. You'll figure the rest out as you go along, but you cannot just have 5 going into the season and feel good about it. So unless they were trying to move Braxton before they had to pay him and get some compensation, in that case, the compensation would probably not be as much as you want. Would probably be like a 4th round pick, because you're going to get 1 year and then you're going to have to pay him $24 million a year. So it's not as if he was signed to a team friendly extension and had 3 more years of control and he's a young tackle. At that point, you're going to get a very high pick for him with only a year left of control before a looming $24 or $25 million a year deal that you are going to have to basically have in place before you trade for him. 4th round, 3rd round at best, but I really don't think you'd probably get it.
Which tells you the value would be more of keeping him, because if he gets paid $24 million a year, you're probably getting a 3rd round comp pick. So there's no point in you trading him away unless there's a team that pays over the odds because they're planning on extending him themselves and not wanting to battle somebody in free agency, similarly to what the Bears did with Montez Sweat. That's the only way. But if, like you said, if the offers they were getting were like a 3rd or a 4th round, what would be the point? You may as well just keep him and then let somebody else pay him $24 or $25 million a year, and you kind of lap up the compensatory pick. I think that's probably how it works out for the Bears. But if a rookie beats him out at left tackle, it's good news for the Bears, because Braxton Jones is not a bad left tackle, and if your rookie comes in here and performs to a higher level than that, it means that your line looks pretty damn good going into the future anyway.
Yeah, and it really comes down to that 3rd tackle debate. If you didn't watch our podcast with Matt Miller that came out last week, or I guess that's early this week.
Monday, yeah.
Yeah, that seems like 3 weeks ago at this point. If you didn't check that out, definitely do, because we went through this particular scenario, and it really is about how the Bears see tackle and really that 3rd tackle spot. Now, maybe they think Ciaran Amagaji's ready. He certainly didn't. He looked anything but ready in his single start last year. Again, he's a young player. We knew he was going to take some time. Maybe the new offensive line coaching staff thinks he's the bee's knees and is going to be a great swing for them. If that's the case, then all this talk about tackle is probably not warranted, because they're going to move forward with Braxton at left, Darnell at right, and, Ciaran as their swing if they think he's good there. I don't feel super confident in that. So I think engaging in tackle talk is perfectly legitimate. But even if you did get a 3rd tackle, the point is not necessarily to trade Braxton, because you're trying to keep Caleb alive. That's the overarching goal here. Definitely don't want to trade up. Yeah, I understand that for sure. You could trade up with New England for a second round pick next year. I doubt they're going to go for that. 10 to 4 is a big jump points wise. I don't think they would swallow. I mean, GMs have reputations too. It's kind of like agents taking lesser contracts to get one done. It's going to be on their record, and people are going to look back and go, yeah, but you didn't make as much money as you could have with this guy. And it's the same with GMs. Like Elliott Wolf's not going to want to have that he traded, from 4 down to 10 and got 1 second from next year. Like that's not commensurate value. He's probably not going to do it. There will be quality at 10. Yes, Doug, there will absolutely be quality at 10. It's a question of, can you withstand the slings and arrows of everybody saying, no, you should never pick a tight end in the top 10, even if it's Tyler Warren, or even if Genty's there and you pick Genty, oh, you should never pick a running back in the top 10 because there's so many running backs, blah, blah. Everybody's using all these arguments from other years and other classes, and this class is not that class. And the bottom line is you have the picks this year and you have to spend them on these players. And this lot of players is not the same as a typical lot of players. So you got to adjust. That's just what good teams and good GMs do. So I would probably stick a pick if I was them. We'll see. Foreman said, I'd love to hear EJ and Ciaran's take on the value of an RB in the first round. What is the over on total yards for the pick to be worth it? I don't necessarily think it's yards. Like I think yards is probably a bad measurement. But in terms of overall impact, like it's about taking pressure off Caleb because they couldn't run the ball last year. That was largely an offensive line problem. That's the first thing they've addressed. They've already done that. Again, if they hadn't done that, I don't think we'd be entertaining any thought of an early running back in the draft. You got to get the offensive line right before you expect a running back to be able to do anything. Anyways, they've done that to a large extent with the offensive line. I think it is, time to look at an upgrade at running back. Do you have to do that in the first round? You don't. There's going to be quality at 10, as Doug said, but there's also going to be quality further on down. I do think a player like Genty tips the scales. I think he is worth it at 10 because of what he would bring behind a revamped offensive line that would really allow Caleb and the rest of the offense to flourish, because you don't just have to put it all on Caleb anymore, in terms of escaping behind a bad line, in terms of being the only way to get forward progress on the offense because you cannot run the ball. They'll probably dip into the tight end market at some point in this draft and give, a compliment to Cole Kmet in terms of probably a dedicated pass catching tight end, because you can pick up blockers in free agency or as a UDFA. So they're going to give a lot of options, but Genty would be a focal point, right? Mm-hmm. Even as a rookie, other teams coming into town would be focusing on stopping him. And that means Caleb has more freedom to operate and less stress on his shoulders because there's a huge target on the guy behind him. So, I think a running back upgrade will happen during this draft at some point. Whether or not it happens in the first round, it's kind of a pie slice value question of like how much makes it worth it. I think if he comes in and is a good player and lives up really to his pre-draft billing, it's worth it, like regardless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you can go back and look at previous guys that were taken, and ultimately it comes down to, are they playmakers? Like it's all well and good you getting a productive running back, but the ones that have been successful are the ones that you felt pretty good about. Like Jahmyr Gibbs, Ben Johnson mentioned it himself. He didn't feel like he was taking a running back. He felt like he was taking a weapon. So if they think that when you look at Ashton Genty that he can be a weapon in this offense, they're not going to worry about it. It's the same with Bijan Robinson. Like everybody talking about him at the time was that this guy is going to be a weapon for the Atlanta Falcons, and it's something that can bring them to a new level. The problem for them is they didn't really have, I don't think they had the offense ready for Bijan at the time, but they're trying to build it, and the quarterback position, we'll talk a little bit maybe after the draft about what they've done there. But you even look at guys like Saquon, right? Like Saquon was not just brought in as a running back. He was brought in as kind of somebody that can elevate the offense to a next level. So if they believe adding Ashton Genty with, look, the weapons that the Bears have at wide receiver, they have obviously Cole Kmet. They've started to build the offensive line. They're in they have their quarterback that they believe in. Like, they're in a position that if they believe that Genty is a difference maker, they can make that selection. If they didn't have Caleb or didn't have Rome or didn't have DJ or didn't upgrade the offensive line in free agency, you'd be like, there's no way in hell you can be taking a running back that early, because you don't have an offense ready to be able to put that guy in a position to succeed. The Bears have added players on this offense over the last 3 seasons that now, if they make that pick and Ben Johnson said this guy can just be a weapon in my offense, so be it. He's going to be that level. You don't want to do is you don't want to kind of overdraft someone that isn't worth it. That's when you get the Clyde Edwards-Helaire type guys where the Chief picked him and then suddenly a couple of years later he's not even on the team, right? Like a Najee Harris, who coming out looked really good but then has been replaced since. So like those are the ones you want to avoid. I always worry when you're in the back half of the first round taking a running back, because I think that's a little bit riskier, because usually it's kind of the eye of the beholder for running backs at that point, rather than someone that you're talking about as a top 10 to 15 talent. When you're talking about a guy at that level, you're talking about a difference maker usually. If you're taking one later on in the first round, you're probably taking a bit of a risk. And that's where first round running backs tend to fail. So Genty, I think you can probably feel confident in, if they do pick him, that he's going to be productive within the offense. If they go elsewhere, it's probably going to be a little bit more of a risk. But I think it's probably going to be Genty, or they'll wait, because they know the value of those second rounds and third round picks, that there's going to be a lot of running backs within that area that can add something to this offense, that can at least be a tag team partner with DeAndre Swift.
Yeah, not that they're going to have the opportunity, because I think trading down is going to be really difficult. I think they're going to want to do it. I don't think they're necessarily going to have the opportunity to do it. But if they could move back a few picks and take Omarion Hampton, I would be fine with that as well. Other than that, I'm with you. Leave it till a later round. There are lots of backs later on that you could choose and still have a boost to the offense. So we'll see how it goes. Jay Crossover, on the topic of a trade up, if Hunter or Carter slips to 4 or 5, do you think the value of trading is there? 1, I don't think those guys will. 2, only for me, if we're talking about the Bears, and we are, Carter would be the pick. Not because I don't like Hunter as a player. I love Hunter as a player, and I think he's extremely talented, but the Bears don't necessarily need him as a wide receiver. Could they use him? Of course. Do they need him way up high in the draft? No. Do they need him as a corner? He would start for them just because he's so skilled, but the Bears are also fairly well stocked at corner compared to most other positions on the team. So just the positions that Hunter plays, I don't necessarily think that he would be a target for them. If Carter slips, which I don't believe he will, because he is probably the blue chip prospect in this draft that is team and scheme agnostic, doesn't really matter where you put Abdul Carter. He's going to be able to create production because he is an elite edge rusher. If he were to slip to 4 or 5, sure, I would entertain the Bears trying to trade up for him, but they would not be the only ones at that point. They would be getting full value, whichever team was sitting there with Carter on the board. And again, you have to look at it from their position. Somebody said earlier in the chat, takes 2 to tango. Yes, it does. The answer would be why? Like, what are you going to get? Because you're not going to get necessarily a bevy of picks, and you'd be giving up one of the absolute few blue chip players in this draft. So why would you do that? Like, if he was there, if he was available, sure, the Bears should sniff around and do their due diligence. It's going to be expensive. He would be worth it. Sure. They wouldn't be the only ones. The price would probably pretty quickly get driven out of the range they were willing to pay. So interesting scenario, but unless there's something we don't know, and I have heard absolutely nothing about Abdul Carter that would keep me from selecting him just as soon as you could, I don't think it's a super likely scenario.
Can we convince GMs that he has arthritis in his shoulder?
Oh, speaking of smoke, it is that time. You're going to start to hear some pretty wild stuff about prospects. Um, I'll do the best I can at countering that for players where I've either heard that stuff a lot earlier, because there's lots of stuff that I've heard about players up and down the board that don't typically share, because again, I'm not hearing it directly. Like, people are, it's not the players or their agents or their trainers telling me these things. It's people second and third hand. And when you hear it from enough different sources that don't necessarily talk to each other, you can start to give it some credence, but it's still not stuff I'm going to share because I can't verify it. Right. And I feel a responsibility not to put that stuff out as supposition, not to say, well, maybe, and then, it casts doubt or shadow over a player that can cost them spots, that can cost them money. I don't feel like I'm at all well sourced enough to do that. But as I start to hear things that I can generally corroborate as false, like just purely false, like nobody's been saying that for months and months, and now somebody comes out and says the opposite and says, oh, that guy's, an example would be a player you've heard is like an absolute workhorse, is in early, stays late, in the weight room, extra sessions the whole time. And a week from now you hear, oh man, that guy's just lazy. He just doesn't love ball. Right. I'll probably come out and say, that's possible, but I don't think that's true, because multiple people have been telling me for months now, outside of smoke season, that he was a super hard worker. I'm going to go with the multiple reports from different and independent sources, as opposed to one person who is probably trying to do exactly that. Cast aspersions, drive value down, maybe just have them slip a spot or two so their team can pick them up, because that does happen every year, multiple times.
Yeah, especially at this point, because really once you get to like 7 to 10 days out, I treat everything as bullshit, because
I'm
really,
already kind of there. I
because
feel like we might
yeah,
have crossed the threshold.
I think so, but I think once you get that close to it, like, nobody's telling you real information at that point, because agents are battening down that, especially for players that they feel confident in, like, they're not letting this information out unless they're trying to get to a particular team. Like, this is where I don't really trust a lot of the information. But then also, like yourself, when you hear it at this point, I'm of the opinion that unless it's been reported by the person that's got this information, I tend to not say anything, because I always say it's not my story to let out. And
Right.
then once it does go out, I'll talk about it and kind of say it in that way. But like you said, we've heard it from multiple players over the last number of years, where they're saying, oh, they're lazy, and then you kind of questioned it at the time, and then they get to the NFL and you realize the person that was saying it, or the story that came out, was complete and utter garbage. So it's going to happen, and this is the time that it is. So what I would say for people that do like to watch these players and do like to kind of follow it, if you haven't heard a story about somebody's personal life or kind of personality or how they play up to now, and now suddenly you do, don't believe it, because it's probably wrong.
Yeah, especially if it's strongly counter to what you have heard from multiple other sources. You have to question the timing. And I think most NFL fans, most draft fans have come around to a level of savvy, even if they don't follow the draft super closely, to realize that by now, inside of 30 days, like, just kind of lock it down. Like, don't let that stuff affect your perception for the most part, unless it's something that's, demonstrably true, right? We've certainly seen pictures and stuff come out, and accounts. Again, you have to question the release timing, but that stuff's a little, I don't want to say easier to swallow, but you can take it somewhat more at face value. Whereas the sort of nameless, faceless rumors, I hate those. We'll talk about those later. Speaking of not nameless or faceless, I'm going to put my name on this one. Also, this is from Foreman. Why do y'all hate Stewart? I feel like he's shown the ability to try out different pass rush moves. Landing them is a different story. I think you answered your own question. He's not good at football. He is a tremendous athlete. He is a great athlete. There is no doubt about that. Great athletes and great football players are not synonymous. When you get both, that's when you have superstars. He is clearly one. He is also clearly not the other. He is a terrible football player right now. He does not show any kind of high level football ability with any consistency whatsoever. Now, for everybody that's going, oh, well, just coaching, we can just turn him into a good football player. That is not as easily done as it is said. So I don't hate Shamar Stewart. I hate the idea of spending a very high pick on a guy that doesn't currently know how to play football very well. And that's the bottom line. If you think, oh, and you have that sort of gambling mentality and you're like, yeah, but the payoff would be immense if he just figured it out. It's a huge if, and you are correct. It would be if a guy with that much physical talent figured out how to play football. Great. You also have to ask, like, hey, he's at a very big school with a history of a lot of good defensive line prospects, solid coaching, right? College coaching is not crappy for the most part. Now, decisions about how to use people in college can be very questionable depending on the program. But in terms of like coaching for the position, like it's pretty good. So the answer is, it's the old Moneyball one, right? If he's such a good hitter, why doesn't he hit good? Right? If he's such a good pass rusher, why does he look completely like a fish out of water on a lot of his tape? Now you do see the occasional flash, but you can't really draft guys off the occasional flash and expect it to happen all the time. And I think that's where people make the leap. Well, if he could just do the one thing he did like all the time, well, sure, you could say that for almost every player in the draft. You can say that for players in the draft who are, much more highly accomplished. Kenneth Grant, right? Kenneth Grant, his flashes, which are quite frankly much more common than Shamar Stewart's, but still the knock on Kenneth Grant is he's got to link that ability and show it consistently. And if he does, he's going to be an absolute force. And I think the likelihood of that happening for Grant is a whole lot more likely than the likelihood of the sort of bridge that Shamar Stewart would have to cross to get to that threshold. So it's not that I don't like the player or the person or anything else. It's that people just assuming that he's going to start figuring out how to play football when he hits a much higher level of competition is a bad assumption in my mind.
Do you know who he reminds me of just from the draft talk and where people start slating him in their mock drafts and everything with the combine? Was it 2 or 3 years ago, the defensive tackle out of Northwestern, Adebawore, where I saw people in mock starting to put him in like the 20s. And I'm like, the production's not there. Obviously there's the athletic upside that's there, and people really were into kind of having him in, and then suddenly people were like, why is he falling so far? Well, he's falling that far because the production doesn't match the athletic ability. Yep. And it's the same thing. If you can tell me you can have Shamar Stewart in the 4th round, I'm like, okay, that's fine, because
if your defensive coach loves him, go for it. Like that. Yeah. That's a place to take that kind of risk. But the idea that he will go, and this has been kind of consistent drumbeat for about the past like half a month, is, oh, he will go in the top like 20 picks guaranteed. And I'm like, better you than me. There are always players in the draft that I'm like, you go ahead and take the risk. I think Ben Solak said this really succinctly a few months ago. Like, I am happy to have somebody else take that chance. Like, he is clearly in that camp for me. Like, if it works out for you, great. I'm not willing to accept that level of risk, so go for it.
Send them to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
That's my point.
See. Yeah, there was one on here about pass rushers as well that I'll just kind of tack on. Bit of a different question. From Bailey. Thanks, Bailey. Mike Green will be off the Bears board, I imagine. You would be correct. Pierce has a few off-field questions, few more than a few. Also probably going to be questionable. I don't know about off, but questionable, not a high value. So again, he will go before the Bears would pick him. Is the most likely edge if they stay Michael Williams. Michael Williams is a good system fit in terms of physical structure and who Dennis Allen likes. He's a similar but not the same case as Shamar Stewart because he has actually demonstrated some ability to play football. Has he hooked it all together? No. Is he a great athlete? He absolutely is. Is he farther along in that progression than Stewart? He most certainly is, as you watch the tape. So it's a similar case, but not the same. I don't think, and again, we had this conversation with Matt Miller, that edge is going to be a likely target for the Bears because the value isn't there. Like if Mike Green was a squeaky clean prospect, yes, he would absolutely be most likely the Bears' top choice at that point. He is not. So he's not going to be. Same with Pierce. And Pierce, I think in the way he plays is a little bit less of a Dennis Allen fit, but that's arguable, but that's not really the point. That's not why we're saying he's probably not going to be the pick. And after that, you really are going to a guy like Donovan Ezraku, and I don't like Donovan Ezraku at 10. I'm going to wait another 10 picks before I grab that guy for sure. Micah Williams, kind of the same thing. Does he have the talent to go up high and be productive? Sure. Are you making a leap if you do that? Yes, it's the same leap for Stewart, just a smaller leap, but it's still a pretty big leap. So I just don't think value lines up with that position need. And I think it really starts to line up with the Bears' 2 second-round picks. I think 39 and 41, there's a bunch of players there that sort of line up with like what Dennis Allen needs, their production, their athletic potential. That's kind of the sweet spot. So I really don't think edge is going to be in their sights at 10, or even if they trade back a few spots, because the value just isn't there again in this draft. Typically, that's absolutely where you would pick an edge rusher if you needed one. In this draft, I just don't think it is for the Bears.
I think the only way they go in, and it's not particularly that position, but to get somebody that can impact the pass, is if Dennis Allen believes in one of the hybrid guys. Like if he wants a Jalen Walker, wants Campbell within his defense, because we've seen it in his defense. He always has someone that plays that role, and if they like Odengbo to be that kind of, I guess your mainstay at defensive end across from Montez Sweat, but also having that guy that can play linebacker, but also can push up and rush the passer. Would I be like, if they go and take Jalen Walker or Campbell, would I be incredibly surprised? No, because I see the fit. Do I think they'll do it? Probably not. But if they did, you could make a case for why they made that selection, because we've seen it in a Dennis Allen defense before. These are two guys that are highly rated, but again, it comes down to the positional value. But if he feels like they can be that hybrid linebacker, kind of on certain downs, rush the passer and do it at an effective rate, I wouldn't completely rule it out. I don't think he'll be the top, but like, let's say the guys they really like and they said were like their blue chip guys were gone by 10. Couldn't move up, can't move back. I'd rather them pick someone that they feel like is actually the talented player, even if it's not the greatest position. So let's say they do have Jalen Walker there and they think that he can be their hybrid player in between, and it's just so much better than the next 5 or 6 players that could be taken behind them. Would I be mad if they went that way? No. Do I think it's the most perfect fit to be like an edge rusher? Absolutely not. But if it's a position that Dennis Allen has said he needs and wants someone, and this is the spot to go get them, and the guys that you really thought were blue chippers were already gone, I could see why they would make that selection. But in terms of a pure edge rusher, kind of like how we said with Matt on Monday, I just don't think there's going to be anybody there that you feel comfortable with.
I think that's what's really probably shaping up to be most likely is you're not going to have any great choices. And by great, I mean positional value lines up. They're the top player on your board. It fits a need. Like those 3 things are not necessarily going to align for anybody at 10. There are going to be some questions about any player you pick there. And are there questions every year with almost every player? There are. Are there more this year? There are, because of the makeup of the field of draft candidates. So I I think that's probably the thing to lock yourself in for and just sort of fasten your seatbelts is there isn't going to be a lovely fit just sitting there waiting to be sort of plucked off the tree for the Bears. That's not how this draft is shaping up. Flying Scotsman, and this is a question I really wanted to get to. So Kyle Long said he played left tackle in college and swapped to right tackle in the NFL. Can Membu go the opposite direction, or do you guys think left to right is an easier swap? I don't really care whether it's left to right or right to left. Some guys can do this and some guys can't. And that's that. It's not, are they talented enough? Or are they athletic enough? Are they coordinated enough? It 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 just isn't that sort of a thing. It's an odd thing. Like lots of you probably played baseball growing up. I played baseball. I definitely had a dominant side in baseball. I threw right-handed. I definitely fielded, with the glove in my left hand, threw with my right hand. And typically I batted from a right-handed stance. Now, I could switch hit. Was I as good a hitter left-handed as I was right-handed? I wasn't. Was I a decent enough hitter that my coach let me do it? Yes, I was. I could hit for average from the left side. I could not hit for power from the left side, especially against power pitchers. Like as guys started throwing faster, my batting average on the left-hand side declined. But in little kid, medium kid ball, like I could bat pretty effectively from the left-hand side. And if that gave us an advantage, that was great. But nobody was expecting a home run when I got over there. It's kind of like that for tackles. Some guys are great switch hitters and they hit for average or power from either side. Some guys can't swing the bat left-handed, right? If they're right-handed, they can't even. You've seen these folks. Maybe you are one of these folks. You understand it, right? Doesn't mean that you're not a great player or a great hitter. I saw some great hitters, right and left-handed, that could not bat from the other side at all. We would do it after practice as like sort of like linemen catching punts in football, right? Hey, if you can get a hit from the opposite side of the plate, we'll end practice now and no wind sprints or whatever. And there were some hilariously horrible at bats from some really good athletes because it's just a thing. Some people's brain can do it and some people's can't. Like it seems to me like a hardwired kind of coordination thing. You don't choose to be ambidextrous, you just are, right? So when everybody says, "Oh, it's easy or it's hard," or I think it goes case by case. And if the guy can do it, he can do it. And if the guy can't do it, you definitely don't want him trying to play left tackle, protecting Caleb's blind side in the NFL when he's never done it, if he's not 100% comfortable. Because even if he is 100% comfortable, he's going to get beat anyways. He's a rookie. All rookies get beat. I don't care what you're saying. If he's getting beat because you basically are making him play with one arm tied behind his back, I hate that idea. So the idea that it's easy or hard to me is kind of not really the issue at hand. It's, is he one of those guys that can do it? And the answer is we would have no way to know. The Bears have a decent way to know. They can get him in, work him out on that side, put him under some pressure, see if his mechanics hold up. Like if they feel really good about it, and trust me, if you're going to pick a guy in the top 10, you better feel really good about it. Because again, if you're picking a tackle in the top 10 and he is a right tackle only, and you just picked a right tackle up high with one of your draft picks who's playing pretty darn well, you're basically saying, hey, we're so loaded. There is no position on this team where somebody could start this year from a top 10 pick. That to me is a really hard pill to swallow. So either he better be 100% comfortable with switching, and one of those guys that feels like he can play left, and obviously he can play right. He's done that really well. You better be like 100% lead pipe lock certain that he can do that, because if you can't, the pick doesn't make any sense if it's Membu.
Yeah, I think a big part of this is, I know Kyle Long has said this, but Kyle Long, I think, is a bit of a different story because of just how athletic he was. That like he was able to do it. And look, Kyle Long went from guard to guard, but also was able to move out into tackle and be pretty good as well. So that tells you the type of player he is. But I just want to kind of go back to, what was it, 4-ish years ago when the Bears selected Tevin Jenkins. And the whole talk was that, oh, Tevin can play left tackle just because he played right tackle, because they were saying, because, oh, there was already somebody there at left tackle and they needed somebody fill in at right. He started off that kind of training camp at left tackle, was struggling a little bit, then gets injured. And then evidently was put in at guard, and people were saying maybe he'll go back out to right tackle. Like, there's certain players that can do it, but also I think it's a bit of a difference when you're talking to somebody moving from left guard to right guard and right guard to left guard, because you're not really put out on an island if you make a mistake. You can kind of recover a little bit better when you're on the inside. When you're put out at left tackle and you've never been there before, and like, they can look to see what his technique is like, but again, we talk about this, it's repetition. He doesn't have them at that position. So when he does get beat, when he's at right tackle, he might figure out a way to kind of help himself get an extra second or two. If it's even a little bit clunky on the left side,
Yep.
he's not going to have those repetitions, and it's going to take a while for it to build it. And will he be given the time? And that's the thing that we know in the NFL, is that players aren't. You get a bit of grace in your rookie season, and then fans start getting angry at you because you're making mistakes. So like, that's where I would say it's a risk. At 10, you've got to be 100% confident that he can play. If you're still making a projection, even after meeting him, at that point, you can't make that pick because it's too much of a risk. Because if you do take Membu at 10, project him as a left tackle, and it doesn't work, what do? You've already signed your 2 interior guards. You've signed your center for the next 3 years. You're probably going to end up paying Darnell Wright because he's been really good at right tackle. So what do you do with Membu? Do you try and push Darnell Wright into left tackle? And then what if that doesn't work?
No.
So then, no, but like, for example,
I know, but they need to stop doing it.
That's the next, but that would be the next step. You would find someone
Yeah.
to go out there.
Yeah.
And if that doesn't work, well, then you're stuck with 2 right tackles and still don't have your left tackle. So like, that's where I'm at the point where I would much prefer maybe going to a different position and get a more natural left tackle that can develop behind Braxton Jones, like a Josh Connerly. And when Braxton goes, he takes over and is at least the above average left tackle, but you know he can play the position. I'd rather be a little bit more risk averse when you've spent the money on the rest of the guys than if you're not 100% confident in a guy that can do it, because this isn't just someone that just played right tackle for the last 2 years. He's played right tackle pretty much his entire career.
Yep.
And that is a big projection. It's a big risk. And it's why we're not really talking too much about tackles, because there's a lot of criticism for different reasons on all these guys. And there's nobody you can say with full confidence that you bring in here to play left tackle that you'd be like, oh yeah, that's that position sorted. Let's not worry about this. I think that's the problem. If there was those guys and there was more than one, you would feel good at being at 10, because in an ideal world, you get at 10, the top player on your board is a left tackle and you're happy. But that just doesn't seem to be the case this year.
No, it's not going to be the case this year. And I think that is a really well said argument about the offensive line in general, because we had a question on Will Campbell as well. And like, I think Will Campbell is kind of the reverse, right? You don't need him to be a right tackle. You'd need him to be a left tackle if you again want him to succeed Braxton Jones. Everybody says, oh, well, if he's not a tackle, he's a guard. I really don't think with Campbell, the way he plays currently, that he would be a guard. Again, he's got work to do to be a guard, because he doesn't, some tackles play like guards anyways. He's not one of them. And so again, if you pick him and Braxton's staying for this year, which I think is probably the most likely and the best course of action, you're sitting the guy you picked at 10 without really hope of playing outside of injury. And you're just waiting for him to take over next year at left tackle, because you're not going to kick him into guard. He's certainly not going to displace either of the guards this year. So he's not even going to get any seasoning at NFL speed, even if it's at a different position. So the argument for Campbell is tough for me as well, because he's not as versatile, I think, as some other players. The guy you mentioned is the guy that I think would be the most, maybe the best path to follow in this draft if you want a replacement left tackle, which would be Josh Connerly, and hoping he's there at 39, because he is a true left tackle. I think he's quite good. He does need some seasoning, but like he's already a very good player. And if he was forced into service at left tackle this year, I think he would be serviceable. And he may end up starting for another team at left tackle. So if he's just still there at 39, I think that's a great value proposition. The guys at 10, it's a challenge. Like this year is a specific challenge, as you mentioned. And I just don't think there's a great answer. I think there are fine answers, and I could see how they come into play or fit or how you work your roster around them. But I don't think there, again, is a sort of silver bullet that you drop in for the offensive line at 10 and just go, oh, yeah, we're set. We're good to go.
Yeah, I guess just a little bit of news that the Bears have signed Case Keenum as their veteran quarterback.
I heard that might happen today. I was hoping that it was just a rumor.
He got paid $3 million. So
yeah, I think it's fine, and it is better than not having one on the roster. And Keenum's fine to that point. They're possibly more interesting options, but at this point, this is what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Question from John: if Carter falls in the draft, what draft pick do you be needing to make calls to trade up? I think you call if he gets to 4. Yeah, I think he call if he gets to 4. I don't think he will, but if he does, if he gets to the Patriots pick, they're probably just picking him, so they're probably not going to take the call. But you at least call. You do your due diligence. If through some miracle he gets to 5, yeah, you're definitely on the phone. But like I said, probably 15 other teams are on the phone too. So it's going to be fast and furious, and you're going to have a very good offer, which I don't necessarily think the Bears would be able to put together the best offer. But 4 or 5, probably before that, he's off the board anyways. So, but if he gets to 4, I would call just to call. If he gets to 5, I'm definitely on the phone, but I'm figuring out pretty quickly that probably the Bears are not going to be the top candidate, even though I might like them to be. That's just the way it's going to go. Thoughts on a realistic return for trading down at 10? It's not going to be as good as you think it is. That just get used to that this year too. There are going to be a lot of people mad and, oh, you went off the chart and whatever. If you stay on the chart this year, you're probably not going to make any trades because people are going to go, well, I'm not getting full return for this, so I'm not going to pay you full price for this. So, I think, again, because there are so many good players down in this draft, even at positions of need for the Bears, which is great because there are running backs and defensive tackles who are going to get selected on day 3, round 4, round 5, even round 6 that have starting potential because both of those fields are incredibly deep. And there's some receivers down there that I like too, that you could fill in your receiver ranks with. So, and, quite honestly, way down in the draft with those last 2 picks the Bears have, there's a couple of offensive linemen that I would take flyers on. So if you pick up another, 5th round pick or 6th round pick or whatever, it's not just a coin flip like it is in other years. There are going to be significant, talented players who are left at that range. And if you have a pick, you can grab an extra one of them. So while it might not seem on face value like you got what you deserved, you could get some very good value, and we'll see. It depends on how far, of course, you're trading down from 10. People are going to start at the chart, but they're going to have to basically carve 30% of that off to get the conversation started, I think.
What is going to be funny is you'll probably see the odd trade in the first round, right? I wouldn't be surprised if you see better return for trades to happen at the top of the second when these players start to fall down, and then there's actually a legit reason for these teams wanting to move up. So like you may if you move down a couple of spots in round 1, you may be very underwhelmed where you might just get like a 4. But then suddenly someone's falling that people thought was a first round pick and gets close to 39 and you start getting calls and maybe you get a 3 or a higher 4. Like these are some of the things. It's all about who's going to be there, how badly does a team want them, and do they think a different team could move up. The problem with where you are in round 1 is there's such a wide variety of players that are still going to be available that most teams are not going to be desperate to move up. But when you get to the second round and the top of the second round, which is why we always see trades every single year at that point, is teams want to jump on players they thought they wouldn't have an opportunity to draft because they would be first round picks. So that's where it's going to be very interesting. I think that it'll be one to monitor any trades that do happen in the first round versus what happens at the top of the second, because again, it just comes down to teams, their willingness to try and move up for a particular guy, which I don't know if it's going to be there in the middle of round one.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So great question from both Silver and Danny Young. I'm going to combine these two because it's about the same player. Silver says, have you heard anything about any news about the Josh Simmons recovery? And Danny Young says, my crazy thought, draft Josh Simmons, doesn't need to start right away and can get healthy, but still gives you some long-term insurance and immediate upgrade at third tackle. All right, gonna just sort of lump all these together. No, I haven't heard anything. He did move around at his pro day, which he said he was going to do at the combine. It was a limited workout, but the fact that he is moving this quickly after a torn patellar tendon is encouraging, certainly. But do I have anything beyond that? I do not. Could I read those charts? Well, maybe only a little bit. Certainly not a knee surgeon. But I couldn't tell you whether a guy is going to be able to perform at a high level in the NFL based on his recovery or not. That's just not the business I'm in. So even if I'd heard, it's certainly on track. He was able to get up and move around, which he said he was going to. So he fulfilled that. That just means he's hitting his timeline so far. No setbacks. That's good. Outside of that, no, I don't have any injury news on Josh Simmons. Danny, I was team you on this one in terms of strategy up until a few weeks ago, because Josh Simmons on tape grade, just purely tape grade, not injury or anything else, is the top left tackle in this draft for me. That's above Will Campbell. That's above Membu, even if he could play left tackle. Josh Simmons is a very smooth and polished pass protector. He is also a good run blocker at left tackle, which you usually don't get both of those things. You do in Josh Simmons. That makes him my top tackle if he was healthy. Other than that, Foreman says, Danny, I love that idea. I just wonder if the guys have any insight into his injuries or whispers about his commitment to football. I will simply say this because this is what I can say fairly. I have cooled on the idea of Josh Simmons in the past few weeks. And that's it. I can't offer any more on that. I too thought that was a wonderful idea. I love that strategy. I am less sure about that strategy now than I was 3 weeks ago. So that's all I got for you.
I can say, I guess, in terms of him, the player, again, I've been probably from the start of this process, he was the one guy that I said, if you want to try and solidify left tackle, he would be the guy in terms of the talent is there. In terms of the injury, like I've heard two separate things. One that obviously, like you said, it's on track, but just because it's on track, there's still anyone I've spoken to in terms of it that kind of looks at some of these medical things, and just from his initial kind of diagnosis, he's still not going to be able to play before the start of the season. So like the Bears are in a situation to where if they liked him as the player, if they could clear his medicals, and the only thing that was holding it back was when can he start, they wouldn't be pressed into action because of Braxton Jones. So they could make that selection. The reason he's going to fall is because he's probably not going to be able to start the season. Like, it would be a push. And this is not just based on people that have seen his medicals. It's based on his injury and the history of that injury. Like, you can try and push back and get earlier, but then you are increasing the probability of re-injuring it again. And that's not what you want to do. If you're taking him in the first round, you want him to get fully healthy so that you don't have to worry about that anymore. All I'll say on this is I don't think the Bears will take him, because I don't think they can risk taking an injured offensive lineman anymore because of what's happened. They've been burned over the last couple of years. You don't know what he's going to be like coming back from that injury. It's not like he was injured, he came back and looked good. If that's the case, you're probably not worried about a lot of this thing. I think if the Bears are taking an offensive lineman in round 1, you're probably looking elsewhere than Josh Simmons, mainly because the medicals and, as you said, there's just the idea of Josh Simmons from a couple of weeks ago. I don't think what he did at his pro day changes anything. So I think it's probably the same if a team loved him 5, 6, 7 weeks ago and weren't worried about his injury concerns. Probably will still put him on their draft board to be a target. But let's just say I don't think he's going to be a top 10 pick like he should be if he wasn't injured. If it was
Oh yeah.
purely based on talent, I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're probably looking at 15 to like 20 to 22 is probably the sweet spot for Josh Simmons right now. And if he comes back fully healthy, someone at that point is getting a player with the talent level of a top 5 pick.
Yeah. That'll be somebody's bet to make for a couple of reasons, and we'll see if it pays off. In terms of talent on the field, incredibly talented player for sure.
Yeah.
TJ Johnson, say they trade down, take D-line in the first, Scorton, Grant, Pierce, one of those guys, and one of Ibuka or Golden is there at 39. Do you take the wide receiver and hope for O-line like the Arizona guard at 41, which is Jonas Sabainea? I think, wow, lots of pieces to this. I don't know that Ibuka or Golden are going to be there. There's actually a decent chance Golden is one of the first wide receivers off the board, certainly first 3, I think. So will either of them last to 39? I doubt it pretty highly. I think if they do last through day 1, they will be some of the first players off the board on day 2. So there's that piece. If they were there at 30, if Emeka Ibuka is there at 39, I am sprinting the card to the podium.
Not happening.
It's not happening, but I would be like, sure, absolutely, 100%. And then in terms of O-line at 41, this is again with one of those 2 picks, I'm really thinking they should go. I mean, again, if they went D-line in the first, that's why you would not be taking an edge. But I really think this is probably better value for edge. If you were going to take O-line, I think it's a little early for Jonah. I love Jonah. He was one of my offensive gems this year on Bootleg. I think he's a tremendous player. I think he's going to absolutely outplay his draft selection almost no matter where you pick him. Love the physical makeup, the mental makeup, like great football player. 41 still feels a little bit early because he is a guard for me. He's not a tackle. That is no backhanded compliment. I think he's going to be a great guard right out of the gate. So, and for a long time. Again, with need and where it lines up, like if he's there with their pick in the 70s, sure, go ahead. You're getting a great football player. At 40, I think there are going to be a bunch of other talented players at positions of need that they may go after there. So, multifaceted question, really cool. And one of the coolest things about the draft is how all these pieces fit together. And how you, again, take a need off the board by choosing it or say, hey, we're going to kick that one down on purpose. We think the value is a better spot here. And if we wait on this particular position, we're not going to get value. So those sort of weighing of decisions throughout all of draft weekend for all of the teams is one of the most fascinating aspects of the entire exercise for me. So I love questions like this. Thank you for that, TJ.
Yeah. Look for a team like Seattle when it comes to Ibuka. They've been one where, again, you look at the links there, you already have JSN there, him and Ibuka very, very close at Ohio State. So would not be surprised with obviously DK leaving and Tyler Lockett leaving. They need to fill that role. Would I be surprised if he's their pick in round 1? No, I don't think so. I agree with you when it comes to Jonah. I think maybe if you move down in the second round where someone's giving you extra picks and you fall in towards the back half of the second round and you want to go O-line, I agree with you. I think you won't be disappointed if you draft him because
no, not at all.
He's going to be a really, really good player. I just don't think at 39 or 41 the value is there just because of other potential options that could still be there. Like you could get to 39 And like we spoke about earlier, you could potentially see Josh Connolly still be there, who could play left tackle for you. And that's where you're like, that's where the value would match up versus someone that you're playing at, that you would have to play at guard, and you've just paid one in terms of Jonah, the other Jonah
Yeah, I was going to
Jackson.
say Jonah replacing Jonah is a very
Yeah.
strong
But
possibility.
you already have him under contract, and you're probably
For
going to
sure.
have Joe Tooney under contract when they have to make a few adjustments for the cap purposes. So
Mhm.
like, it's, for me, it's probably not worth it at that point. But like I said, if you move back into like the late 50s, or like you said, if it even is your third round pick, like if we pick him, I'd be excited because I'm like, well, you have your action plan for
Yeah.
if you don't re-sign either of Joe Tooney or Jonah Jackson, you already have somebody to slot in straight away.
Yeah, and even if either one of them get hurt, yeah, I know you've got Ryan Bates and everything else, but in terms of moving forward to the future, you have a very good building block on the interior offensive line. Don't think I necessarily want him snapping, but again, that doesn't lower his value for my. He is going to be an elite guard. I
Yeah.
fully believe that. So, TJ had a question. Would love to hear thoughts on Patrick Jenkins, DT from Tulane, Savion Jones from LSU, defensive lineman, and Rocket Sanders, the running back from South Carolina. Jenkins, I have not watched yet. Savion Jones, I have watched. I like him a lot. I think he's probably going to end up being a fourth round player. I don't necessarily think that's his value. I think in a lot of years, if there weren't that many guys playing his position, he would be a third rounder or possibly even a late second rounder. This year, I think he's going to be a fourth rounder and well worth it. And then Rocket Sanders, same thing. He's a good player, but good players at running back in this draft are going to be like the 22nd ranked running back. So there's just so many other names. And a little bit farther down, Carlos Peterson asked, how would we feel about the Bears going Devin Neal day 3? I would do backflips. I love Devin Neal out of Kansas, the running back, and I would pick him well before a guy like Rocket Sanders. So I would love that. And it's very possible he's going to go on day 3, not because he's not a good running back, but because there are lots of other good running backs stacked up in front of him. I think Devin Neal is a great all-around back, would slot right into the Bears rotation. I would be thrilled if they added that kind of talent on day 3. He's a great player, really fun. So if they are lucky enough to be able to select him with the current, I was going to say early, but it's more like a mid day 3 pick. It's 46 picks after the day starts. If he's still there and they get him, sure, that that's going to be a 5th rounder at that point. Like, yeah, Devin Neal in the 5th, sure, and
Absolutely.
you are going to see it, and you are going to see it this year. Like guys that you typically would take a couple of rounds higher at defensive line or certainly running back, you're going to be like, that guy's still there, sure. And they're going to outperform their draft status pretty much immediately because they're great players. So,
yeah, exactly. I said this I think last time we did this stream, that with the amount of running backs that people believe in, that think that they're going to be difference makers, and like a lot of them probably will be, there's going to be guys that everybody right now is talking about as second round picks that are going to be there in the 4th, because it happens
for sure.
every single time, and people will be like, how is this guy still there? It did happen with Bucky Irving last year. Like, Bucky Irving was not a surprise when he came in terms of what he did, because he was a player that many people were earmarking as a really good running back prospect, and he fell. And that happens at the position in general, but it especially happens when it's a strong class, because it's going to come down to the fit for a specific team. And then there'll be some teams that already have running backs in place and wouldn't take one that high. So like, it's going to be really interesting to see which are the players that fall. Like, don't be surprised if you get into like the back end of the 3rd round and like the guy that a lot of people love in terms of Caleb Johnson out of Iowa is still there, or one of the guys from Ohio State is still there, or you mentioned like Devin Neal or Jay Harvey. Again, there's so many of these options where you look at them and you're like, you can make a case for any of these guys being some of the more productive backs in the draft class, because we talk about obviously a lot about like Ashton Genty and Amarian Hampton because they're the projected guys that could go in round 1. But like, you can name another 6 or 7 guys that you believe can be, by year's end, is a starter for a team. And that's where it becomes really, really interesting.
Yep. I was just counting. So this is a question from Eric Bono. How many DTs would you say are each in the first and second tier of this class? Sounds like it'll be hard to miss at that position, and curious on your thoughts on how deep they can go for one. So the first part of your question really depends on how you define tiers. Everybody's got different breakpoints for those. I'm just going to give you some raw numbers because I hope it'll illustrate the point to really the second part of the question, how deep they can go for one. I currently have 25 defensive tackles ranked, and I still have 12 more to go. So we're going to be like at 35-ish defensive tackles. And after that, I kind of don't care. There are still more. The earlier question was one from Tulane that I haven't even looked at, and he's not on my list. Just to be fair, he's not going to be one that gets ranked in the numbers I talked about. So there's going to be 35 players at that position, just defensive tackle. Keep in mind, some people have a wider definition of defensive tackle. The way I do my rankings is edge, defensive end, and defensive tackle. And there's a bunch of guys in my defensive end rankings that a bunch of people are going to lump into the defensive tackle rankings. I don't have them there. It is a pure defensive tackle ranking for me, and there are going to be 35 guys in there. For the guys that have wider rankings, like Dane Brugler and DJ, they've mentioned numbers in the 40s, low 40s, 41, 42 draftable grades in defensive tackle this year. Again, with just pure, I'm going to have 32-ish. And are 32 defensive tackles going to get drafted? Probably not. That's way above the average number. So some of these guys that I have ranked as draftable are going to be UDFAs. Yeah. And some of the guys that I didn't even look at, like the one that got mentioned earlier, are also going to be there. There's going to be like 15 UDFA defensive tackles. That's one for every 2 teams, right? Yeah. And they're talented guys. They are going to get picked up. There's just so many of them this year. So how deep can the Bears go? The answer is as deep as they want to. Again, value is going to be all over the board. Some teams are going to love some of these guys. Some aren't. It doesn't matter. Typically that sort of cuts it down into like, well, if you want a penetrating 3-tech, there's these 4 guys in the draft. And if you want a run stopping 0, there's these 5 guys in the draft. And then there's, the sort of all-arounders, maybe there's 5 or 8 of them, and you've got 15 or 18 defensive tackles throughout the class, but really there's only 5 that your team might want because they've already got the other 2 types, right? Very few teams are looking for all 2 or 3 types of defensive tackle in one draft, right? So it really narrows down pretty quickly to like 5 to 8 guys that your team might be looking at, and then you're just trying to jockey for position. Here, there's 10 of every type plus. And, some more, some less, but you want a penetrating 3-tech, you can get one up high. You can get one in the 3rd round. You're going to be able to get one in the 5th round this year. Absolutely. 100% will guarantee it. Right. Yeah. So it's kind of as deep as you want to go.
Yeah. I guess to give the comparison of what I think DJ said earlier on when he was doing his evaluations, that he had whatever it was, like 40 something this year. And he said compared to last year, he had like 13, 14.
Yeah. So Dane basically doubled his. He was, I think it said 21 last year. And I think he was 43 this year. The Beast just came out, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's over 40. So it's basically double in 1 year, which is bonkers. Ridiculous. Yeah. John S., big fan of Kelvin Banks and taking him at 10 if he's there. I too am a big fan of Kelvin Banks. 10 is a little rich for me, but here's the kicker. Kelvin Banks, I think, is one of the more versatile players. And if you needed him to play guard for a year, which you don't right now, but Jonah's healthy and Joe Tooney's healthy, he could do it with his play style. He is one of the tackles that translates really well to guard. Now, I also think he is a very capable left tackle, which makes him rare in this class. And to have both makes him extremely rare. So would I hate it? I would not hate it. I would think it was early. Good player, good fit. I like the succession plan in multiple ways. And honestly, if the sort of worst case scenario happens for the first 9 picks, they could do a lot worse than
Mhm.
Kelvin Banks. Would I be jumping up and down at the selection? I don't know. Is he a very solid football player? He absolutely is. It's more about at 10. And as we said at the top of this, at 10 means a very different thing this year than it does in typical years.
Yeah, again, I think he was one of the guys very early on that I kind of earmarked as when you knew Josh Simmons was with the injury concern, he was a guy that everybody spoke about, obviously because of what Texas were able to do this year, but also kind of just looking at what he was able to do last year as well. You want guys that one can be consistent enough, but two can improve. Um, he's definitely I think he's definitely could be an option there if they settle on, let's just say, like we said, the guys they feel are blue chippers are gone. And at that point, they're like, well, we may as well get our value out of a certain position. And they decide to go offensive line. Would I be surprised if Kelvin Banks is the pick? No. Would I be happy with it? Yes. I be completely convinced that it's going to work out and that he's going to be your left tackle going forward? No. But like we said, Ben Johnson has said he wants 8 or 9 guys. And he's a good offensive lineman. So I don't think you can complain if he's the pick.
Yeah, there you go. I'll give you the very basic value judgment. Kelvin Banks, Ciaran Amagaji.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'll take Kelvin Banks 10 times.
I like the other guy's name more though.
Yeah, he's got a tremendous name. There's no doubt about it. But I think you might be able to play left tackle as well as he did last year.
Probably
his only appearance. Now, am I writing Ciaran off completely? No, he's an incredibly young player, and no matter what, he was going to need a bunch of time to get ready coming from the school he came from, and that was kind of known. He got thrown in what was an altogether terrible situation last year. I think everybody agrees the Bears offense was a complete hot mess. So, is it a fair assessment for a young player? Absolutely not. Is it something you would write him off for? No. Was it bad enough that you would feel comfortable going in with no other options at third tackle this year? It was a little worse than that. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be bad forever or never will play tackle at a decent level in the NFL. What I am saying is if you're counting on him, if you are one ankle turn away from counting on him, you probably didn't prepare to the level that a coach like Ben Johnson wants you to prepare for based on his comments. So I'm just gonna put it that way. All right, we've been at this for almost an hour and a half, and we should probably figure out how we're gonna give away this hat, because we have this, for those of you that joined late, we have this wonderful homage new era collaboration Bears cap. Complete with all its stickers for those of you that like stickers. And we're going to give it away because we hit 1,000 subscribers thanks to all of you, all of your interactions, all of your questions, your likes, forwarding it on to friends. All of those things helped. We can't thank you enough. It's been a fantastic ride so far. We're having a good time. We're getting pretty charged up about what we're going to be able to do for all of you, not only during draft season, but also a little bit throughout the summer. Maybe more sporadically throughout the summer, but hitting it hard at the beginning of next season. We are excited. The whole, like, it's a new era for the Bears thing seemed pretty hollow after about 6 or 8 weeks last year. It really feels like this is the time. We just started a year early with Ben Johnson coming on and certainly fixing the offensive line, at least on paper, in a way that they haven't in 2 or 3 years. It does feel like a very different time for the Bears, and all of us are as excited as all of you about all the improvements we hope to see on the field here pretty soon. So, yeah, Ciaran and I have already tried to take it, and EJ stiff armed us. If only my stiff arm was still that good, Mike. I don't know. How should we do this? I don't have a great idea. I mean, we do like random number generator or something, but like that's less fun.
Maybe what we do is we let Mike pick the best comment that he saw in the chat, and go with that, or the best question. So we'll be like question of the stream, and we can let guys keep kind of putting them in, and then in about 3 or 4 minutes time, if he wants to go have a scroll
Whoa.
through. That could be an option.
I
And
like it.
see how we go.
That's for bats. Oh man, that's Doug's the early leader in the clubhouse, man. Major league, let's go. That's fantastic.
I will say I wanted to. I'll get you to read it, but there's a comment there from Nathaniel Law that I want you to read out.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Hang on, I'll get.
If you can't find it, I can read it for you.
I'm sure. Maybe my stream's behind yours.
It was further up. He says, I'm way behind right now, but EJ, did you see that Connor took Mike Green for the Bears in the NFL SC episode after you specifically told him they never would?
Oh, I just found it. Yeah. Again, if it's a what you would do draft, he is. I think most of those collab drafts probably should be, because as Trevor said at the start of ours, if you didn't see it, well, A, if you didn't see it, go back and watch it. It's super fun. B, it's a what we would do draft, not us trying to predict what the teams will do, because everybody's doing that in mock drafts right now and it gets kind of boring. It's much more interesting from an analyst perspective, especially when we're picking with other analysts, to pick people's brains and go, I can't wait to see what you do for the Lions, because I know what I would do. What would you do? And getting those different perspectives is the real value of those exercises, not as a predictive tool for like, and of course, everybody floods the comments immediately and says, oh, the Ravens are never going to pick. It's not the Ravens picking. It's me for the Ravens, right? I chose this for the Ravens because I think it's cool and it's what I would do. So as long as it's a what they would do mock draft, like, you know, sure, he can live in a fantasy world where that's going to occur. Nathaniel, I didn't see that, but thank you, because I will text Connor right as soon as we get done and give him holy hell about it, because he knows better.
I'm loving some of the comments since we've made Mike have to pick this. The hats.
I'm just glad that we put it on Mike. Like, we're making Mike do work here.
100%. Eric says, my question, Mike, how are you so handsome?
Mike is a tough being so talented. Yeah, well, that's true. Mike is incredibly talented. So
I guess with that being said, you mentioned obviously that we hit the 1,000 subscribers, which was a big goal of ours to try and get to before the draft. Sure. So again, from my point of view, like, a huge thanks to everybody that tunes in for these live shows. We love doing them, especially around this time, because there's lots to talk about. We like to engage with your questions, because obviously, like, a lot of the time during the season, while we do kind of our podcast episodes, we don't always get to go live. So this is the kind of time of the year where we get to do a lot of these and get to interact with all of you guys. But we do read all the comments that come on the videos and we try and respond to them as well. So we do appreciate that. So anybody that is in the chat, please do like the video. If you're listening kind of to this back, put your comments in on what you want to see, what you want us to talk about. I do want to put in, Mike has had a little message that I wanted to play before he has to make a decision. So to give him an extra minute or so. So again, this is kind of his, anybody that listens to the podcast throughout the season where he had a minute on the mic. So he has about 45 seconds here. So I'm going to play the video for you.
Thank you, EJ and Ciaran. And thank you, Bear Era fans, for getting us over the 1K subscribers mark right here on YouTube. It has been an absolute honor and a pleasure to be on this journey alongside EJ and Ciaran with each and every one of you here on Bear Era. It has been a career highlight. And I am so excited for the 2025 Chicago Bears, led by Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams in a brand new offensive line. But I'm more excited to be watching each and every one of those games with you right here on Mike on the Mic on Bear Era. Cheers for getting us over 1K, and cheers to getting us to the big next milestone. Back to EJ and Ciaran.
Mike, how are you so handsome?
I think it's the homage hoodie, but that's
100%.
100%. I mean, that just puts him over the top. That makes him a 12 on a 10 scale. Yeah. Foreman, EJ, you seem to be so sad about this draft class. Far from it, actually, Foreman. I love this class. I think it's really, really cool because it is so different, right? And just because it's going to be chaotic and just because the values are so close for so much of the class, I think that's going to make it a fascinating and really fun draft. And yeah, there are really good players in this draft all the way down. So lots of teams are going to be able to refill the coffers at some very important positions. And yeah, some aren't going to be able to at those sort of like if you need a quarterback this year, good luck to you. Like it's not a great year to need a quarterback. There are some good players in that class as well, but not as many as there are typically. So I personally love this class and feel like I've kind of taken up the sword to be the defender of it's not a bad class. It's just different, right? I feel like I'm defending the little kid at school, right? He's not bad. He's just different. Like this is a fun draft, and it has a ton of really talented players up and down the board. Got to talk about some of them today. Did a bonus episode for defensive tackles that's going to show up on the Bootleg Patreon, and got to talk about some players that not a lot of people are talking about that I think are going to be really, really good down the board. So I love this class. It's a really cool class. I love every class because hey, that's how I got started in this business. And it is what builds the league. The draft is the foundation of the NFL. If you know the draft, you know the league because you know all the players that make it up. And as long as I've been doing this, you end up knowing the entire league. You have a scouting report on just about everybody. And I think this class is very different, but in some ways no different. There's talent all over the board. You just have to kind of try and maximize your swings and go get it. And it is there. So I think there's going to be some real winners in this.
Yeah, 100%. I think what people need to remember is that every draft class is different, right? Like sometimes there is a top heavy class. Like last year when you looked at the top of the first round, and even when you kind of compare the first round in general last year, it was very strong. But then, like many said, it kind of fell away after maybe fourth round. And there was teams that were trading away picks from last year to get into this year because they knew it was going to be a deeper class. Well, it's not the prototypical top heavy guys where you can easily name who the top 15 picks are going to be. You're going to come away with, and I always say this, you hit the end of rookie minicamp and you don't actually care where people were selected anymore. And then you just look at your overall class. And that's what the Bears have to do. They have to look at this as they have 10 and then really their 3 picks after that. And you mentioned it before, EJ. They need to treat that as kind of like their grouping of the draft of those are the guys that have to be productive for you. Anyone else you get after that, whether it be a UDFA or whether it be a day 3 guy, you're kind of taking a risk on and you're taking a punt on and being like, let's see how they'll do. Can they find a role that can get them onto the roster? And if that's the case, those picks are kind of bonus. But 10, 39, 41, 72, those are the ones that you need to hit on. Those are the ones that need to be at least rotational players, productive players that you can kind of rely on moving forward. And that's what I think fans need to look at this draft as. Like you said it before, don't get too high, don't get too low after round 1.
Yeah.
Once day 2 is over, and that's where like for us here, we'll do a proper like deep dive into the draft class. But a lot of our focus will be on what the Bears do in day 2, because day 1, you said it, like there's probably going to be a lot of disappointed people, but also when you go back and look at it, you'll be like, oh, well, the pick probably makes sense. You can probably figure out a reason why, just because there's not really that many star quality players that you're going to get like overly hyped for at that position. And that's just the way it is this year. But if they come away with, after those first 4 picks, 4 guys that you feel pretty good about that can make a difference this year, it'll be a good draft for the Bears. And that's what you have to hope for, that you look at those as a combination rather than the isolation of the number 10 overall pick. And I think that's what the GM and head coach were basically trying to tell people this last week, because that's what they were saying. They were like, we're really excited about our day 2 picks, because they also said it, that in the first round, like there's a limited number of players that are their blue chip type guys. Like I said, there could be 4 or 5, which means they just might not be in a position to get one. So then they're just going to pick somebody that they feel like is a good fit, both culturally, but also scheme wise. And it might not be the player that everybody's talking about, or it might not be the player that's in a lot of mock drafts, because there's going to be a wide variance this year more than any. And all I would say is, before you make your judgments, wait until the end of day 2 and see what they come away with.
Yeah, I would say so as well. I think it's a wise strategy for what is going to be a wild draft. Is if you want your takes to hold up, hold your takes for a little bit. Speaking of takes, Bailey says, I'm a bit scared this year. It's the first year that I've disagreed on a fair few prospects with EJ. Been following for years. Thank you for that. And usually we come to similar conclusions. Bailey, I would say be proud of that. Like, that's how you know that you're starting to have your own opinions, and you can also put your stick in the ground and say, nope, I believe this is a good player, and my favorite analyst or my favorite analysts disagree. And when you end up being right about one of those, it feels really good because it is completely independent. And I'm not always right. I'm wrong on lots of players. So if we disagree and you end up being right and I end up being wrong, that's cool. That means you're growing as an analyst, as someone with an eye for the league who's been doing it for multiple years and grading players. And I think that's a good thing, not a bad thing. So when I started to disagree with some of my heroes, I started to feel like I actually had things that were worth saying and worth sharing, and being right on a few of them as well. Wrong on just as many as I still am, I think. But when I could look at a player that somebody I really respected looked at and they said, I don't like him. And I said, no, I do like him. And here's why. And that ended up being their ticket to the league or their ticket to being good in the league. That's when I really started to feel like I was, getting legs as a draft analyst. And if that happens for you this year, awesome. We'll see. We'll compare notes afterwards because my rankings come out and you can put yours out and we'll see how that all works.
Yeah, I guess this is a really good question to end this on, because I'll give kind of my opinion, because I probably came from a similar position maybe 10 plus years ago. But Santiago put up a really good comment. For those that didn't grow up watching football, how can we start watching film and understand what to look for? So while the first part of it wasn't the same for me in terms of, I still, even though living in Ireland, I still grew up watching all Bears games because of my family being in Chicago. I wasn't as big into just watching kind of the tape on everybody until you're probably looking at about 10 to 12 years ago, kind of trying to understand more about the draft and how that worked out. And the one thing I would say is, you look for a thing, kind of look at your favorite team, what you like about certain players, and see those particular traits and focus on those traits and see what players, when you just watch, kind of have a similar type of style. That it's something that you like about a player, whether it's an offensive lineman and you like the aggressive kind of mauler type guys on the inside, focus on some of those guys. Or maybe it is a linebacker and you like to see somebody that is athletic, that can get to both sides of the field, that has good vision, things like that. When it comes to running backs, I'm always of someone that don't go anywhere too fast. Look for the hole and see if they can find it, because there's nothing worse than a running back going somewhere too fast and falling into somebody's ass. Like those, I would say, like, over time you'll pick up little things that you like about certain players, and you can kind of focus on it, and then your perspective starts to broaden out a bit. It's the same with like edge rushers. Maybe you prefer kind of the bigger guys that have a specific move, and then, or maybe you prefer the more fast, leaner, athletic guys that beat players with speed. Like, those are the things I think early on is you focus on some of the things, some of the traits that you see from players that you admire, and see what players in the collegiate level have similar enough traits, maybe at a small or a lower level of their development yet, but they'll still have certain things that you can kind of think back on of a player that you really like to watch. And that's, I think, a pretty good base for you to start understanding more about when you're actually, what to look out for when you're watching tape. The other thing I would say is listen to people that do it for a living and what they say about certain players and some of the things they look for. And then you can kind of incorporate that as well.
Yeah, my my tips for figuring it out are, I'll give you 3, although there's an endless number of them. The first one is write it down or type it out. I mean, record it, right? As you watch a player, record it because it will make your brain focus, right? You'll have to come up with a thought and find a way to put it down in a way that when you go back to it, it reminds you of an important point about that player. The second is if you're going to watch a player, do that before you read a lot about that player or hear a lot about that player or listen to your favorite analyst on that player or whatever else, because it is impossible once that stuff goes into your brain to separate it from your own perception because you haven't made your own perception yet. Right. So make your own perception independently as much as you can. It's impossible to do it completely, but don't listen to 5 or 6 takes on one guy and then go watch him because you'll be looking for those things harder. You'll add scrutiny to that. So try not to do that. And then go back, listen to those folks after you've written down your thoughts, after you've made your thing. Listen, especially for things that you didn't even look for. If people are talking about wide receivers and they're talking about alignments or sets or what he does at the top of the stem or what his catching, protocol is, and you didn't think about any of that stuff, think about whether or not you want to add that to your next eval, right? Am I going to look for that in the next play? And each time you do that for each player and each type of player, for each position, each year you do that year over year, and you go back and you look at your stuff and you say, how did I miss? Like, I thought this guy was really good. Turned out he was really bad. Where was the thing that I didn't see or didn't take into account that accounted for that? And then you'll roll that in the next year. And as you do it, player over player, position over position, year over year, you will add to that base and you will start to then have things that you can go back on and compare to and go, oh, this guy is like that guy, or I missed on this guy for that reason. I'm not going to miss on this guy because I don't look for that, or I don't account for that, or I didn't even have that in my evaluation. And you'll just grow your sort of tool set and your understanding. And like Ciaran said, you'll start to develop this base that is yours for, people call it an eye, right? It's your eye for assessing players. You'll start to grow that eye and that eye will get sharper. And that's the way to do that, is make sure you write it down, try and stay unbiased as long as you can about a player, and then go ahead and dive in and listen to what everybody said about them, because you'll find pros and cons and things you thought about and things that match up with what you wrote down. That always feels great. By the way, I do this with analysts that I look up to, like Brandon Thorne for offensive line. My deal with any analyst that I deal with is the first question I ask is, have you watched X? And if their answer is yes, then we can talk about him. If their answer is no, I say, let me know when you have, and we'll talk about him then. So I asked Brandon this week, hey, have you watched X? He said, yep. I said, great. Do you have an eval for him? He said, yep, I'll send it to you. He sent me his and I read it and I was like, wow, that sounds like mine. And I sent him mine and I said, man, I got to tell you, when this lines up and it comes from you and I came to those points independently and it matches up with you, who are one of the sort of preeminent experts, I got to tell you, it means a little bit more. It feels really good. It feels like I actually know what I'm doing a little bit. He laughed at that, but that's the deal that I have with, I do it with wide receivers with Matt Harmon. I do it with offensive linemen with Brandon. I do it with defensive linemen with different analysts around. And, as long as you have that agreement, you can learn and you can read their stuff and say, oh man, I didn't even think about that. If you're one of the things I didn't used to think about a lot because I didn't play offensive line was hand placement, right? A lot of people are talking about hand placement. Is it good? How often does it happen? Does it replace quickly? All these things. And you just sort of add those things in. So if you follow those rules, you'll grow yourself a base. Will it happen immediately? It will not. It takes a long time to get good at this. And if you're committed to it and it's a lot of fun and you want to keep doing it, that's the way to get better.
I guess to go on the little competition that we had, I believe that Mike picked a winner, and it was Eric, who was in the chat, is the winner of the hat. So I think he's going to send Mike a message and enjoy the new era Bears hat.
And I will ship it off once Mike sends me the email. I'll find a nice box and get it off to you. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, everybody that's here. We got 50 people watching. And, you know, everybody that watches this later on couldn't make it right now and goes back and, you know, maybe subscribes. We deeply appreciate it. Being over 1,000 is important for us. YouTube treats us differently if we're over 1,000 as opposed to under 1,000. So we're very happy to be in that club. And you'll be seeing some upgrades pretty soon on live streams and pods, both, that we can now roll in because we're over 1,000, and that's all thanks to you. So the hat is the least we could do. We will also be getting some swag around draft time from Homage to send out to all of you. So be sure to look for that. But in the meantime, geez, I don't know what our next thing is. I don't know if we've decided what our next thing is, but
I think
we'll yell about it when we figure it out.
Yeah, like we will confirm it and let you guys know exactly on social media. Like we will obviously the week before the draft have a pretty cool episode in terms of obviously we talk about the draft a lot. We don't really do too many like mock drafts per se because there's a million of them going around. But when we get to that point, we will talk more specifically about the different potential players and kind of like roundtable type stuff that week before. We'll let you guys know of timings, all that sort of stuff of when that's going to come out. But we do have some exciting things coming up, obviously, during the draft. Do tune in for EJ's marathon as well, but we will also be having some when the picks come out. Both myself, EJ, but will be separate but together on certain videos when it comes around the draft time of kind of our thoughts on it. But then obviously like after the draft we'll be doing a kind of a full breakdown of it. I think we'll be doing quite a lot of content. A lot of it also will be on social media, both on EJ's and myself page, also on the page for Bear Era Pod. So if you haven't followed us there, please do. Again, if you haven't subscribed and you're listening to this back, do subscribe, go back and watch, especially the interview that we did with Matt Miller, because a lot of the things that we spoke about today, we spoke about with him, brought it up because they were some of the questions that a lot of you guys were asking us. So that's what we do try and do. We try and incorporate what our community here asks us on the live streaming to try and get it to somebody that is kind of has their ear to the ground on a national scale as well. So again, really appreciate all you guys kind of joining us today. It's always a lot of fun. Like it's been an hour and 48 minutes and it feels like it's been like 20. So like that's the sign of a good time.
Yeah, absolutely. And it wouldn't be that way if you weren't all here with us. We will be back with you very soon. And until then, keep your ear to the ground and try not to listen to too many rumors because most of them are probably false at this time. We'll figure that out in a month or so. But until then, we'll see you around.